The last thing I remembered was the cold, unyielding press of the hospital floor against my cheek, the world tilting on its axis as his words echoed in the void he had carved out inside me. I only married her for her father's connections. Who could have known the old man would disappear for 10 years without a word? Claire, don't worry. Maya has already had the baby. If you weren't afraid of the pain and unwilling to have children, how could I have ended up with her? You're the only woman I've ever loved and respected. The only wife I acknowledge is you. The voice belonged to Mark Thorne, my husband of 10 years. The words were a blade, twisting in the wound of a decade spent swallowing humiliation after humiliation. My vision had swam, my legs buckling, and then nothing. Now I was staring at a piece of paper in my hands, its texture familiar and terrifying. The sharp, officious scent of cheap ink filled my nostrils. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I was in my old bedroom in the home my father had left me. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It was a scene of peace, a stark contrast to the war zone my life had become. This was the last day. The final day of validity for our marriage introduction letter. Today was the day Maya Patel was supposed to become Maya Thorne. A sob caught in my throat, but it was strangled by a surge of pure, undiluted fury. 10 years. 10 years of my life, poured into a bottomless pit of ingratitude and cruelty. The arguments with his parents, who always looked at me as if I were something they'd scraped off their shoe. The letter to my supervisor accusing me of being unfilial. A charge that saw me ostracized and eventually dismissed from a job I loved. The way his sister Chloe had eyed my mother's jewelry, the last tangible pieces of her I had left, and how Mark had coldly told me to hand it over for her wedding or he would divorce me. And the birth. The searing, lonely pain of it. The phone call where he'd said he couldn't get leave, his voice flat and disinterested. All women go through this. You'll manage. I had managed by the skin of my teeth, only for him to take leave afterward, not to see me or our newborn child, but to celebrate the birthday of his childhood sweetheart Clara Jones. The memories crashed over me, a tidal wave of anguish. My hands trembled, but my mind was preternaturally clear. It wasn't too late. Before the shock of this impossible rebirth could fully register, I moved on an instinct deeper than thought. I grabbed the introduction letter and the marriage application form from my desk. The matchbox was in the kitchen drawer. My movements were swift, precise. I struck the match, the flare of sulfur a brief, holy fire. I held the flame to the corner of the papers and watched as my doomed future began to curl and blacken, turning to fragile, glowing ash. I was burning the chains. Before the flames could fully die, a sharp knock echoed through the small house. Panic, cold and immediate, seized me. I shoved the still smoldering papers into a large ceramic basin my father used for mixing paints, clapping the lid on top. I waved my hands, scattering the scent of smoke and a few stray ashes, then hurried to the door. "Who is it?" I called, my voice tighter than I intended. The voice that answered was achingly familiar, a sound that had once made my heart flutter and now made my stomach clench with revulsion. "It's Mark." My body trembled, a visceral reaction to a decade of conditioned response. That voice was so cold. In my previous life, it hadn't warmed in 10 years. It was the voice of calculated ambition, of emotional neglect, of a man who saw me as a transaction. But not this time. This time, the fog of infatuation had been burned away in the fire of hindsight. I would never again seek warmth from that walking ice sculpture. A strange calm descended upon me. My mother had died when I was young, a casualty of her dedication to her work. My father, a quiet, intense man, had raised me. He taught me that when faced with major events, my heart should be as still as water. My cards were to be kept hidden until the moment came to strike back. In my last life I had failed him utterly. I had tangled with the thorns for a decade and died of a broken spirit. In this life, from this very moment, I would etch his teachings into my bones. I took a steadying breath and opened the door. Mark Thorne stood there, crisp in his uniform, his face a mask of polite expectation. He was handsome, I'd give him that. Sharp jaw, clear eyes. But I could now see the emptiness in them, the calculation. "Maya," he said, a practiced smile touching his lips. "Let's go get the marriage license." I clenched my fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. The pain grounded me, kept the hatred from shining too brightly in my eyes. I lowered my head, feigning a shyness I no longer possessed. "Aren't you going back to the base tonight?" asked my voice soft. "Let's wait until you're done with work before we go." It was a stalling tactic, a brush-off. A military marriage wasn't simple. It required reports, approvals. The introduction letter I had just burned was a key part of that bureaucracy. Who knew how long it would take to get another if I even applied for one? Mark looked at the top of my head and I could feel his misinterpretation. He thought my downcast eyes were those of a blushing bride-to-be. He reached out as if to pat my head in a condescending gesture of affection. I instinctively stepped back out of his reach. We both froze. His smile faltered. My heart hammered again, but I forced a pale explanation. "We're not married yet," I said, my voice a little breathless. Being too close might give people something to gossip about. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was all I had. He studied me for a moment, then his expression softened into that false tenderness that had once fooled me completely. "Once we register, you'll be my wife by then. Won't you even let me touch you? Why are you so shy?" His tone was like syrup, thick and cloying. Made my skin crawl. I looked him straight in the eye, then, dropping all pretense. The time for hiding was over. "I won't marry you." The words hung in the air between us, simple and absolute. Mark's frown was immediate, a dark cloud on his handsome face. "Maya." "My name is Maya," I said, my voice even colder than his had ever been. "You can address me properly." Then I added, layering my words with a calm I didn't fully feel. "Comrade Thorn, my father forcing you to marry me without any emotional foundation was indeed excessive. I can understand your feelings. If you had truly been willing, it wouldn't have been dragged out until the very last day. Maya, have never liked forcing people into things. I've already thought it through. Since this rice hasn't been cooked, I won't eat it." In my previous life, I knew his delay had been a strategic move to pressure my father into offering more. A better promotion, more connections. He had waited until the final day, making me cherish the marriage more once it happened, while giving himself the perfect excuse to vanish right after we got the license. It was a clever, ruthless ploy, taking advantage of my father's love and my own foolish heart. Mark's smile vanished completely. He had worked so hard negotiating terms with my father, convinced the prize was already in his grasp. He had imagined his glorious future, never expecting that I, the infatuated girl, would be the one to refuse. Remembering my father's promises and my own obvious past admiration for him, his expression grew stern. "Maya, are you truly certain you won't marry me?" His tone was heavy with gravity and unspoken threat, as if the moment I confirmed it, he would cast me aside like garbage. But the scales had fallen from my eyes. How could I possibly be unworthy of him? I had the education, the family background, the looks. Marrying me was him reaching above his station, yet he had the audacity to act as though he were the prize. I couldn't hold back. "Comrade Thorn, please call me Comrade Patel." I met his gaze squarely. "Comrade Patel, are you really sure you don't want to register the marriage with me?" he asked, as if granting me a final magnanimous chance to repent. "Comrade Thorn, I'm very sure." I paused, then delivered the blow I knew would wound his pride most deeply. "Since we're not getting married, then forget about the work opportunity you asked my father for. Otherwise, people will say you'd sacrifice anything for the sake of a promotion. That wouldn't sound good at all." The moment my words fell, Mark's expression shifted through several shades of shock, anger, and finally, a calculating panic. So I knew. His carefully constructed narrative of the devoted soldier marrying for love was crumbling. "So, you knew about this and that's why you won't marry me?" he blustered, trying to regain the upper hand. "It's true. I did ask my superior for that opportunity, but it wasn't selfish. It was to secure a better life for you. Right now I'm just an ordinary soldier. How can we nurture a relationship with me away so often? Besides, I only asked your father for a recommendation. If I wasn't qualified, no one would let me advance anyway. You really don't need to refuse me just because of that." In my past life I might have believed his smooth lies. But now, after betrayal and a brush with death, my mind was clearer than if someone had slapped me awake. I looked at him, my tone steady and final. "Comrade Thorn, my father misunderstood and took it upon himself to decide for me. But in my heart I do not love you and I will not marry you. You can find someone else." I started to close the door, but his hand shot out, gripping the edge, his knuckles white. My eyes instantly sharpened with vigilance. For a brief moment, his face was a mask of pure fury, but when I looked again, it had smoothed back into a semblance of gentle concern. Comrade Patel, do you still have some misunderstanding about me? You should say it out loud. Problems need to be solved, not left to fester in silence. His eyes searched mine. Did someone tell you something? As for Clara Jones, she and I are just friends. So he finally brought her up. The woman next door, his childhood sweetheart. His past life words still rang in my ears. He had always loved her, and it was a grievance for her that he had to put up with being tied to a woman he didn't love. Comrade Thorne, I said evenly, prying his fingers off the door one by one. I've already told you the one I love is not you. My father was mistaken. I had originally thought of going along with it and marrying you, but I can't get past the hurdle in my heart. I can't spend my life with someone I don't love. I hope you understand. Even if you don't, that's fine. I'm only informing you. With a final shove, I shut the door in his face, cutting off his stunned gaze. I leaned against the wood, my legs suddenly weak. Mark Thorne, you and I are finished. Through the window, I watched his retreating back, straight and stiff with anger. He was not a man who accepted defeat. I knew this was far from over. But the first battle was mine. I had to see my father. No. I grabbed my bag and headed straight for his office, praying I would get there before Mark could try to intercept him and spin his own version of events. The game was afoot, and this time I was playing to win. The walk to my father's office was a blur of frantic energy and simmering rage. Every familiar street corner seemed to whisper a memory from my past life, a life of quiet desperation I had been too blind to see. I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years, my mind racing ahead, plotting my next moves. Thankfully, my father was still at his desk when I arrived, the room smelling of old paper and strong tea. He looked up as I entered, a warm, tired smile gracing his face. Seeing him there, alive and solid, sent a fresh wave of emotion through me. In my other life, his disappearance for his work with a national security agency had left me utterly alone, adrift in the viper's nest of the Thorne family. Maya, he said, his voice a low rumble. Have you already gotten the license? Where's Mark? He peered behind me, expecting to see my fiancé, and chuckled softly. Did he get cold feet at the door? I crossed the room and took his arm, my grip probably tighter than necessary. Dad, I said, steering him away from his desk and out of the office. I didn't marry Mark. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by pure puzzlement. Why, weren't you fond of that boy? He was stunned, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He had spent a great deal of effort and called in numerous favors to arrange this match, to secure what he thought was a stable future for his only daughter. Now, just as everything was about to be settled, I had pulled the rug out from under him. I didn't speak until I had brought him to a quiet tea house nearby, the steam from our cups rising between us like a curtain. I needed him to understand this wasn't a whim. Dad, I began, choosing my words with care. I don't think marriage is my safeguard. You know that Mark and I don't have a real foundation. We have no common language. Before, I was only blinded by his appearance and the uniform. I took a deep breath, channeling the wisdom he had tried to impart my whole life. But you've always taught me that people can only rely on themselves. If you depend on a mountain, the mountain will collapse. If you depend on a person, that person will walk away. I leaned forward, my eyes pleading for him to see the truth in mine. So, instead of using your influence to help Mark rise in rank, why not help me find a good job? Once I'm stable, I'll meet excellent comrades in the future. And even if I never marry, I can still secure my own life. That way, you can serve the country with peace of mind without worrying about me. My father looked at me for a long, silent moment, his gaze deep and thoughtful. Then he let out a sigh that seemed to come from the bottom of his soul. So, you've suddenly woken up. A small, wry smile touched his lips. I thought you were going to stay lost in that love sickness forever. A shock ran through me. So, it turned out my father had always known. He had seen that Mark Thorne wasn't a good man, but because I had been so insistently, foolishly in love, he had tried his best to mold him into someone worthy of me. In truth, he continued, stirring his tea, I had already made 2 plans for you. Comrade Thorne is decent in his own way. But his kind of good isn't the kind you need. A shrimp may be good, but for a young eagle it's useless. Nothing more than a snack. If you follow him, sooner or later you'll suffer greatly. After all, from the beginning your bond was based on interests and that kind of relationship was never pure. He reached across the table and patted my hand. I'm glad you've thought it through. The relief that washed over me was so profound it left me lightheaded. I had his support. I wasn't alone. I've already spoken to Uncle Wen, he said, his voice returning to its usual efficient tone. Starting tomorrow you'll go to his place of work. He said he'd find a mentor to guide you. From then on your life will be yours to arrange. I'll focus on my research and come back as soon as I can. Thank you, Dad. My eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of gratitude. My father had given his whole life to the country, and the fact that he still thought about me, that he was willing to pivot so completely for my happiness, proved the depth of his love. As for Comrade Thorne, I said, my voice turning cold. Since I'm not marrying him, you don't need to help him anymore. My father nodded, his expression grim. That's true, but that boy has a deep mind. After I leave you must be careful in dealing with him. He probably won't give up easily on this promotion opportunity. His insight was sharp and my heart sank. Mark was ambitious and ruthless. I had publicly rejected him and stripped him of his prize. He wouldn't take that lying down. After a brief pause, my father's expression softened. Enough. Come have a good meal with me first. We'll worry about tomorrow when it comes. I smiled, the first genuine, unburdened smile I had felt in what seemed like a lifetime, and went with my father to a nearby restaurant. We ate and talked of inconsequential things, a precious, normal moment I would cherish. After I sent him off, a strange mix of euphoria and dread settled in my chest. I returned home, my steps slower now. The high of my victory was fading, replaced by a pragmatic caution. My father's warning echoed in my mind. I checked the locks and windows carefully, a habit born from a lifetime of having my space and possessions violated by the Thorns. That's when I discovered it. The ceramic basin where I had stashed the half-burned marriage documents was empty. Aside from a few flecks of ash, it was clean. My blood ran cold. The introduction letter was gone. But I couldn't call anyone for help. Nothing of obvious value had been stolen. And I had no desire to expose my messy entanglement with Mark to the police or nosy neighbors. Maybe that was exactly why he had the audacity to break into my house and take the letter. Because he knew I wouldn't dare make it public. It was a bold, invasive move, a declaration that he was not done with me. Panic threatened to rise, but I forced it down. Still as water, I heard my father's voice in my head. Keep your cards hidden. I quickly packed a bag with clothes and my most important belongings. My identification papers, the small box containing my mother's remaining jewelry, which I had hidden more carefully this time, and the money I had saved. I kept a sharp kitchen knife by my side, my grip on the handle white-knuckled. I was ready to spend the night on guard. At dawn, I would go straight to the unit my father had arranged. He'd said someone would prepare a dormitory for me. Tomorrow I could move in. The hours dragged by, each creak of the old house making me jump. Suddenly, a knock shattered the silence, sharp and insistent. My scalp prickled. My hand, still holding the knife, trembled uncontrollably. If it was Mark outside, he was tall, strong, and trained. How could I, alone, protect myself? Would shouting for help even matter in this quiet neighborhood? Would it come down to a fight where both of us were destroyed? The thought was terrifying, but beneath the fear, a dark, grim resolve solidified. If it came to it, I would fight. I only wanted him to die while I lived. Then a man's voice called out, clear and unfamiliar. I'm Alex Wynne. Uncle Patel should have mentioned me. I've come to take you to the dormitory. The voice wasn't Mark's. And yes, my father had said Uncle Wen would arrange for someone to look after me. The relief was so sudden it made me dizzy. I unlocked the door and opened it a crack. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet, commanding presence that strangely put me at ease. He wasn't in uniform, but he carried himself with a military straightness. His features were sharp and intelligent, his gaze direct. I froze for a moment, not expecting Uncle Wen to send his own son to help me. Have you packed your things? He asked, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. Uncle Patel called my father, worried about your safety alone. He asked me to take you to the dorm tonight. Alex Wynne seemed a bit helpless himself. I could imagine he had been pulled from his own duties, but with one phone call from his father he couldn't refuse. The Wynne family held a special status, and even if he didn't like the task he had no choice. At first he must have wondered how a girl could possibly be so unsafe. But when he saw my face, pale and tense with a knife still clutched in my hand, I could tell he understood my father's concern. I quickly put the knife down, picked up my bag and managed a small smile. "I'm ready. Thank you, Comrade Wen." I knew his family held high positions, so I couldn't presume too much. I needed to be polite, self-sufficient. Alex only grunted in acknowledgement. "It's no trouble," he said, then added almost as an afterthought, "but I haven't eaten yet." I blinked, then hurriedly said, "What would you like?" "The Seeing restaurant should still be open." "I'll treat you." It was the least I could do. He looked easygoing, a slight shrug of his shoulders. "If you're treating, you decide." I realized he was trying to keep me from feeling indebted, a small kindness that I appreciated. But it was late and the state-run restaurants had already closed. Even the Seeing had only a few places still open. In the end, I could only treat him to a bowl of beef noodles at a small, brightly lit stall. The simple steaming food was a comfort. We ate in a comfortable silence, the events of the day finally catching up to me, leaving me exhausted. When we stepped out of the restaurant, the cool night air was a relief. And that's when we ran right into them. Mark Thorne, his sister Chloe, and Clara Jones. They were standing there as if they had been waiting, or perhaps our paths crossing was just a cruel twist of fate. Chloe's eyes lit up when she saw us, a predatory gleam. "Well, well," she chirped, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Isn't this my sister-in-law? How could you be out with a strange man? Sister-in-law, how can you do this to my brother?" She stepped forward immediately, launching into her performance, while Mark's sharp eyes turned on Alex, scrutinizing him from head to toe with a look of pure, unadulterated jealousy and rage. A hot anger surged through me, burning away my fatigue. This was their game, public shaming, cornering me, making me look the villain. I snapped, my voice cutting through the night air. "Watch your mouth. Whatever relationship I have with others is none of your concern. And don't you dare call me sister-in-law. I've already made things clear with Comrade Thorne. I will not marry him. I'm sure he's already gotten the message." I looked directly at Mark, my gaze unwavering. My father has spoken to the right people, and Mark Thorne will never again benefit from my family. As expected, his face darkened, a storm cloud gathering. He stepped forward, blocking Alex and me, his body rigid with anger. "So," he demanded, his voice low and dangerous, "you're refusing to marry me because of this man?" My head grew hot from the provocation, from the sheer audacity of his claim after everything he had done. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them, a reckless, desperate gambit. "That's right," I blurted out, my voice loud and clear. "I like a gentleman like Comrade Wen. His family background and character are excellent and he's a good match for me. I've made it clear I don't like you. If you sneak into my house again, I'll report you to the police." I knew there were no surveillance cameras in this era, no hard proof that Mark had broken into my home. I was only trying to rattle him, to show him I wasn't afraid to fight dirty. And sure enough, he took the bait. "I didn't go to your house," he burst out in a panic, then quickly tried to recover. "Let me tell you, I've already reapplied for our marriage registration report and taken leave. If you think we need to get closer first, then we'll get closer. I've already submitted a dating report too." My blood ran cold. So he refused to let me go. He was using the system, the very bureaucracy I had sought to escape, to force the matter forward. He'd filed a romance report with the organization, tying my name to his in the official records. The thought of being legally and socially bound to him, even in this preliminary way, made me feel filthy. I snapped, my patience shattering. "What's wrong with your brain, Comrade Thorne? I told you I don't like you. I like Comrade Wen. Do you really think you're worthy of me? If you don't get it when I put it politely, then I'll say it plainly." Chloe lunged at me then, her hand flying toward my face. But she never made contact. Alex's hand shot out, catching her wrist mid-air. His movement was fluid, effortless. His eyes flashed a sharp, silent warning that made even me flinch. "Comrade," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "It's wrong to hit people." Chloe, who was used to throwing her weight around only within the safety of her own family, shrank back immediately under his gaze. She hid behind Mark, her bravado gone. In my past life, I had realized her power was all bluster, her jealousy of my job and possessions fueling her cruelty. She had wanted my life, and when she couldn't have it, she tried to destroy it. Now, clutching her brother's arm, her eyes darted toward Alex Wen. The moment she saw his sharp, chiseled features and quiet authority, she froze in shock, her gaze quickly filling with a new, infatuated calculation. "Comrade Patel really is my sister-in-law," she muttered, trying a new tactic. "She and my brother already filed the marriage registration report. They were supposed to get the license today. Don't let this two-timing woman fool you." Her shameless words made me flush with a mixture of fury and embarrassment. I didn't know how to explain this mess to Alex. Just earlier in my haste I'd said I liked him, and now I was afraid he might misunderstand and think I had ulterior motives, that I was using him. He was only here to help. If he got dragged into my mess, it really wouldn't be fair. I was just about to stammer a clarification when Alex spoke again, his voice cutting through Chloe's whining with effortless authority. "Comrade Patel already made it very clear just now. She doesn't like your brother. And as for getting a marriage license, hasn't it not even happened yet? Besides, does a marriage certificate guarantee anything? There are plenty of people who get one only to later pick up a divorce certificate." He paused, his gaze shifting to Mark, pinning him in place. "And more importantly, has your brother ever explained clearly why he wants to marry Comrade Patel?" At that, Mark's face twisted. "Of course it's because I like Comrade Patel that I want to marry her. The only reason she suddenly changed her mind is because of your lies. You'd better explain it to her right now." He strode forward, trying to intimidate Alex with his presence. But who was Alex when? A true second-generation cadre, already holding a high position himself. The moment he released a fraction of his aura, a subtle shift in his posture, a hardening of his gaze, Mark couldn't withstand it. Standing side by side, Mark was a good few centimeters shorter. In that moment, under the dim streetlights, it was painfully clear who was the dragon and who was the worm. "My refusal to marry you has nothing to do with Comrade One," I said firmly, finding my voice again. "The reason is simple. I don't like you, Mark." I turned my gaze to Chloe. "And Chloe, watch your tongue in the future. Otherwise, it won't be good for your brother's career either." I was threatening them now, and it felt good. I also knew that since my father had already spoken to people, Mark Thorne had lost the opportunity and future he was about to gain. If they pushed me too far, I was certain one threat from me would remind them of consequences they couldn't bear. Sure enough, Mark and Chloe didn't press the matter any further. They could only watch, seething, as I got into Alex Wen's car and we drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Chloe's face, twisted with resentment, and Mark's, a mask of cold, furious defeat. I had won this round, but the war was far from over. And I had just recklessly dragged an innocent, powerful man right into the center of the battlefield. The car ride to the dormitory was steeped in a silence that was neither comfortable nor entirely awkward. It was a buffer zone, a space between the battlefield I had just left and the sanctuary I hoped to find. I stared out the window at the dark, sleeping city, the streetlights painting long, fleeting shadows. My hands were still clenched tightly in my lap, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly ebbing away, leaving me feeling hollow and drained. "I'm sorry," I finally said, the words soft but stark in the quiet car. "For dragging you into that. I didn't know what else to do." Alex Wen kept his eyes on the road. "It's fine," he replied, his tone pragmatic. "They seem persistent. A clear, public refusal was probably necessary." He glanced at me briefly. "Though claiming romantic affection for a near stranger is a bold strategy." A hot flush crept up my neck. It was impulsive. I panicked. "Oh, I'll clarify it to anyone who asks. I don't want to cause trouble for you." He didn't respond immediately, turning the car onto a quieter street lined with institutional-looking buildings. "Don't worry about it. My reputation can handle it." He paused. "More importantly, can you handle them? The brother, especially, seems the type to hold a grudge." My father's warning echoed in my mind. "That boy has a deep mind." "I have to," I said, more to myself than to him. "I don't have a choice anymore." He pulled up in front of a 3-story building, its lights mostly out. "This is it. The administrator is expecting you. Room 214. He handed me a key from his pocket. My father arranged it. "You'll start at the logistics department tomorrow. 8 a.m. Don't be late." I took the key, its cold metal a tangible promise of a new beginning. "Thank you, Comrade Wen. For everything. The noodles, the rescue, all of it." He gave a curt nod. "Get some rest, Comrade Patel." I watched his car disappear into the night before turning to face the building. My new home. It was sparse and smelled of disinfectant and old wood, but it was mine. Alone in the small clean room, the events of the day crashed over me. The rebirth, the burning of the papers, the confrontation, the terrifying discovery of the break-in, and the dizzying rescue by Alex. I fell onto the narrow bed, not even bothering to change, and surrendered to a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning I arrived at the logistics department 10 minutes early, my heart a mix of nerves and determination. The office was a hive of orderly activity, with clerks moving between desks stacked with files and requisition forms. I was introduced to the section chief, a stern-faced woman named Comrade Leong, who looked me over as if assessing a new piece of equipment. "Your file is here," she said, tapping a folder on her desk. "You'll start with inventory auditing. Comrade Wen will be your mentor. He'll show you the ropes." My stomach did a small, inexplicable flip. Comrade Wen? Before I could process it, Alex walked into the section, his presence immediately commanding a subtle shift in the room's energy. He was dressed in a well-fitted plain uniform today, and he looked every bit the capable no-nonsense official. "Comrade Patel," he said, his tone all business. "Follow me." The day was a whirlwind of learning protocols, filing systems, and supply chain logistics. Alex was a strict, meticulous teacher. He didn't offer praise, but he corrected mistakes with a sharp, clear precision that was oddly respectful. He wasn't trying to belittle me, he was ensuring I learned. I threw myself into the work. The focus required a welcome balm for my churning emotions. For a few hours I wasn't the betrayed wife or the reborn avenger. I was just a new employee learning a job. At the end of the day, as I was packing up, Alex stopped by my desk. "You learn quickly," he remarked, the closest thing to a compliment I would get. "I've read your file. You have the aptitude for this. But you have to work hard. If not, you won't get converted to full-time." His tone was stern, but I understood it was a challenge, not a threat. "I will. I promise." A colleague walking by chuckled. "Why are you scaring the young lady, Alex? She's only just started. You're nearly 30. How can you say that with a straight face?" "I'll work hard," I repeated, feeling a spark of defiance. I didn't feel like Alex was intimidating me. He was being serious and responsible, and I respected that. The colleague just laughed again. "You two are a natural pair of partners. Go on, go on. I won't be the third wheel." He winked and moved off. I felt a blush warm my cheeks and quickly looked down at my desk. Thankfully, Alex didn't seem to pay the comment any mind, his attention already on a new stack of documents. The fragile piece of my new routine was shattered the very next afternoon. As I walked out of the main gate after work, I saw him. Mark Thorne. He was standing there, holding a bouquet of wilting flowers, and by his side, like a poisonous blossom, was Clara Jones. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag. The sight of them together, a united front against me, sent a fresh wave of disgust through my system. If killing weren't illegal, I would have gladly sent those two hypocrites to the grave together. Mark stepped forward, holding out the flowers as if they were a scepter of authority. "Comrade Patel," he said, his voice straining for warmth. "I want to talk to you properly. I especially invited Comrade Jones today so we can make everything clear. I never said those things you think I did." The sheer audacity took my breath away. What I had never gained in my past life, his respect, his loyalty, I didn't care for now. It was all ashes. "I think I already made myself clear yesterday," I said coldly, attempting to step around him. But Clara moved to block my path, her face a perfect mask of concerned innocence. "Comrade Patel, you must have misunderstood my relationship with Mark. We just grew up together and went to school together. Don't listen to what others say. Mark treats me like a sister. Yesterday he told me you misunderstood us and that's why you refused to get the marriage license. I felt so ashamed I couldn't sleep all night. I thought I owed you an explanation. The performance was nauseating. Mark had the gall to bring her here to spin this web of lies, cornering me with their combined false narrative. They were a team and I was the outsider disrupting their story." Suppressing the bile rising in my throat, I looked up at Mark, my voice stern and flat. "Comrade Thorne, you're overthinking this. The reason I don't like you has nothing to do with you being ambiguous with someone else." I let my gaze sweep over Clara with deliberate dismissal before returning to him. "It's simply because I don't like you." Mark's face tightened. "I've never been ambiguous with anyone else. I can swear on my military career." He raised his hand as if taking an oath. If I ever act improper with anyone but you, may my career be cut short and my life ruined. A silent, bitter laugh screamed in my mind. Heaven, did you hear that? I thought. Hurry and strike this bastard down with lightning. My mind is made up, I said, my voice firm, carrying a finality I hoped would penetrate his thick skull. It's over between us. No one's words can change my mind. If you two come here again, I'll have security throw you out. Mark's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. So, you really do like Alex Wynn? I suddenly realized he was still clinging to that misunderstanding, but I found I had no desire to correct him. Let him think what he wanted. It was a better shield than any truth I could offer. Comrade Wynn is indeed outstanding, I said, layering my voice with a casual admiration that wasn't entirely feigned. It's perfectly normal for me to like him. What does he have that I don't? Mark demanded, his voice rising, the carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Is it just because he has a good family and a good car? Is that what you care about, Maya? I thought you were different. His words were meant to wound, to paint me as shallow. But they only revealed his own transactional view of the world. He couldn't conceive of a connection not based on utility. Before I could form a cutting reply, a familiar, calm voice spoke from behind me. Is there a problem here, Comrade Patel? Alex Wynn had emerged from the gate, his timing impeccable. He came to stand beside me, not touching, but his presence was a solid wall between me and them. Mark visibly stiffened, his eyes flashing with pure hatred. This is a private matter, Comrade Wynn. Doesn't look very private, Alex observed mildly, his gaze sweeping over the scene. It looks like two people are harassing one of my staff members after work hours. I would suggest you move along before this becomes an official matter. The threat was veiled but clear. Alex's authority, both personal and professional, far outstripped Mark's. Clara, seeing the dynamic shift, tugged at Mark's arm. Mark, let's go. It's not worth it. Mark looked from me to Alex, his face a thundercloud of humiliation and rage. Without another word, he turned on his heel, the flowers dropping from his hand to land, bruised and forgotten on the pavement. Clara scurried after him. The silence they left behind was profound. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my shoulders slumping. Are you all right? Alex asked, his voice lower now, meant only for me. I will be, I said, rubbing my temples. I'm just tired of it. He studied my face for a moment. Come on, he said. Let's get something to eat. My treat this time. I was too weary to argue. We ended up at the same noodle stall. Over steaming bowls, the tension slowly seeped out of me. Thank you, I said quietly. Again. He shrugged. It's no trouble. But he's not going to give up, you know. A man like that, his pride is wounded. He'll see you as a possession he's lost. I know. I stirred my noodles, appetite fading. I just don't know how to make him stop. Alex was quiet for a moment, then he said, How about this? Tomorrow you treat me to braised pork knuckle and I'll help you deal with Mark Thorne. I stopped, my chopsticks hovering midair, and looked at him seriously. Why would you help me? It was a question that had been nagging at me. He owed me nothing. He took a sip of his tea, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. Let's just say it's a good deed. Maybe it'll even bring me some good karma. I didn't know what method he used. A well-placed phone call from his father, a word to a superior in Mark's chain of command, but the result was swift and effective. Even though Mark had taken half a month of leave, he was summoned back to his unit the very next day. The timing was too convenient to be a coincidence. Before he left, he came looking for me one last time, his face pale with fury. But this time I didn't even step out of my office. I watched from the window as he stood there for a long moment, his fists clenched, before he finally turned and walked away, his figure radiating a potent mixture of defeat and simmering rage. I felt a door slam shut, a lock turning. It was over. For now. Alex Wynn had, with an unsettling ease, removed the most immediate threat from the board. And as I watched Mark's retreating back, I felt the first fragile stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a very long time, a sense of safety. With Mark forcibly recalled to his unit, a palpable quiet settled over my life. For the first time since my rebirth, I could breathe without the constant, oppressive weight of his presence. I immersed myself in my work at the logistics department, finding a strange solace in the meticulous tasks of inventory and supply chain management. It was orderly, predictable, and the sense of competence I was building was a balm to my bruised spirit. Alex remained my mentor, his demeanor as strict and unyielding as ever. He was a man of few words, but his instructions were clear and his expectations were high. I found I didn't mind. His professional distance was a refuge. There were no complicated emotions to navigate, just a job to be done and done well. But the Thorns were not a family to accept defeat gracefully. The silence from their corner was merely the calm before the storm. The first skirmish came in the form of Chloe. She showed up at the gate of my work unit a week after Mark's departure, dressed in her best clothes, her eyes scanning everyone who came and went with a predatory gleam. "Comrade Patel," she called out, spotting me as I left for lunch. She hurried over, a simpering smile on her face. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd visit. How are you settling in?" Her tone was sickly sweet, laced with a false concern that set my teeth on edge. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, my voice flat. I made no move to stop walking. She fell into step beside me. "It's such a prestigious place to work. You must meet so many interesting people." Her eyes darted around, clearly looking for someone. Is Comrade Wynne around? I'd love to thank him for looking after you." So that was her game. She hadn't given up on Alex. She believed in the old saying that persistence wore down the best of men. She thought that by constantly showing up, by making a spectacle of herself, she could claim a position that was never meant to be hers. "Comrade Wynne is very busy," I said curtly. "And we are not close enough for you to be thanking him on my behalf." Her smile tightened. "Oh, don't be like that, sister-in-law. We're family after all." "We are not." I stopped walking and turned to face her, my patience evaporating. "Chloe, I have no interest in your games. Please don't come here again." I didn't wait for a reply, turning on my heel and walking away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, her face a mask of thwarted ambition and spite. Security, having been quietly alerted by Alex after the first incident, didn't let her pass the gate again. Next it was Mrs. Thorne's turn. She arrived at the dormitory one evening carrying a small pot. Her face was arranged in an expression of maternal concern that I knew was as genuine as a $3 bill. "Hiya, dear," she said, her voice oozing false warmth. "I heard from Mark you like sweet and sour dishes, so today I made sweet and sour pork just for you. It's hard to buy such good cuts of meat. You should really try some." Her eyes gleamed with calculation, as though expecting me to be overwhelmed with gratitude, to be swayed by this pathetic offering after a lifetime of their abuse. I saw right through her. This was about reinstating the connection, about reasserting control. She was the hunter and I was the prey she was trying to lure back into the trap. I didn't open the door more than a crack. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm not close with Comrade Thorne and I don't like sweet and sour food." I kept my voice cold and polite. "Since the meat is so expensive, you should keep it for yourselves. Please don't come again. I've already made things clear with your son." I began to close the door, but she shoved her foot in the jam. "What? That Clara Jones?" Her smile vanished, replaced by a venomous scowl. "So it's her. I knew that little fox was up to no good. Maya, don't worry. You're the daughter-in-law I truly want in my heart. Mark, he was just confused for a while. Don't worry, dear. Auntie will stand up for you." Her performance was almost impressive in its audacity. She was trying to position herself as my ally against Clara, as if we were on the same side. "It has nothing to do with me," I repeated, my voice like ice. "What you or your son does is your own business." She smiled and shook her head, a knowing look in her eye. "Auntie knows it has nothing to do with you. Don't worry, I'll give you an explanation." With that she finally left, taking her pot of sweet and sour pork with her. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a grim sense of satisfaction. The serpent was stirring, and it was about to turn its venom on itself. I didn't have to wait long for the show to begin. In order to keep Clara from interfering in her son's now-vanished prospects, Mrs. Thorne went to the factory where Clara worked as a temporary clerk and made a scene. She stood in the middle of the office, wailing and accusing Clara of being a seductress, of trying to steal her son and break up a happy marriage. The factory, a conservative state-run enterprise, immediately launched an investigation. They were not looking for Clara's relationship with Mark. That was merely a symptom. Their probe dug deeper and they uncovered the real scandal. Clara had been involved with a married man, a deputy director of the factory. Their affair had been going on for months. The fallout was swift and brutal. The deputy director was demoted and transferred to a remote post. Clara, just a temporary worker, was fired on the spot for moral corruption. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The woman who had presented herself as a virtuous victim was now the subject of vicious gossip, pointed fingers and open scorn. Desperate and with her reputation in tatters, Clara did the only thing she could think of. She wrote a letter to Mark, a tear-stained plea, hoping he would take responsibility for her, that his military status might offer her some shelter from the storm. But Mark was fighting his own battles. Desperate to prove himself to his superiors after the humiliation of my rejection and the mysterious recall, he had thrown himself into a dangerous training mission with a reckless bravado. He was trying to reclaim his lost pride through merit. It ended in disaster. An explosion during a live-fire exercise badly injured his arm and leg. He was shipped back to a military hospital, his body broken, his career effectively over before it had ever truly begun. When Clara went to see him, she was met not with the dashing officer she had manipulated, but a broken man in a hospital bed, his future in ruins. He was ruthless. Seeing no other viable future for herself, she clung to the Thorne family, insisting on serving Mark, no matter what, playing the part of the devoted lover for public consumption. Yet when no one else was around, her true face emerged. Full of disdain, she would ridicule him for being useless, a cripple, a man who couldn't even hold on to the rich wife who was his ticket to a better life. She whispered these poison-tipped words as she changed his bandages, a cruel caretaker. Mark lay in that hospital bed, a prisoner in his own broken body, forced to endure her care and absorb the full bitter taste of the world's warmth and coldness. He knew he would never rise again. The ambition that had defined him was ash. All he could do was accept this hollow, resentful version of the woman he had once claimed to love. Their wedding, when it happened, was a rushed, shabby affair. There was no celebration, only a grim sense of obligation and entrapment. It was the union of two broken people, bound not by love, but by shared ruin and mutual desperation. One afternoon, a few weeks after his discharge, Mark came to my workplace. He was in a wheelchair, being pushed by a sullen-looking Clara. He looked a decade older, his face gaunt and etched with lines of pain and defeat. There was not a trace left of the confident, vigorous man he had flaunted in my past life. He held out a small, cheap box of wedding candies. "I still couldn't win back your heart," he said, his voice a hollow rasp. "Maya, why did we end up so far apart?" I looked at him, this shell of the man who had caused me so much pain, and I felt nothing. No hatred, no pity. Just a vast, empty calm. "Comrade Patel," I said, using the formal address as a final, unbreachable wall. We were never walking the same path. No matter how far we went, our destinations would never be the same. "But tell me," he pleaded, his eyes desperate for some kind of answer, some key to his misery. "Why did you suddenly refuse to marry me back then? Can't you at least give me the truth?" I looked at him calmly, and then I did something I hadn't planned. I laughed. It was a soft, clean sound, a laugh of release, of a burden finally, completely set down. His eyes widened, confused and wounded. "What if I told you I had a dream?" I said, my voice dropping. "In that dream I did marry you. I thought you would cherish me. But on the very day we got our license, you left me alone with your parents and sister. They ganged up on me, bullying and humiliating me, taking over my house and my jewelry. And you always stood by their side, helping them against me. Even the child I bore was forced on me by you." I took a step closer, my voice barely a whisper, but every word landing like a hammer. "When I died, I finally understood. Even having that child was thanks to Clara Jones, who refused to bear one herself because she was afraid of pain." I let my gaze flicker to Clara, whose face had gone pale with shock. "The way you all preyed on me when my father was gone was disgusting. That's why I don't want to marry you. Why I refuse to be tortured to death by your family. Is that reason enough?" The more I spoke, the darker Mark's face became. He was seeing a ghost, the ghost of the life he had been destined for, the life his own choices had created. Although this life's path was different, I knew human hearts didn't change easily. Different paths had still led him to the same wretched end. And in this life his end was my revenge. Now seeing him living a fate worse than death, bound to a woman who despised him, crippled and hopeless, I felt utterly, profoundly satisfied. So that's it, he muttered, his head bowing, his spirit finally completely crushed. So that's really it. He fumbled clumsily with the wheels of his chair, turning it away from me. Clara, with one last hate-filled glare in my direction, pushed him away, his form growing smaller and more pathetic until they turned a corner and were gone. I looked down at the box of wedding candy he had pressed into my hand. I hadn't even noticed taking it. I tossed it onto the ground. "Comrade," a voice scolded. An old janitor was pointing a finger at me. "Everyone has a duty to protect the environment. How can you litter?" My moment of grim pleasure instantly deflated. Muttering an apology, I hurried to pick it up and toss the unopened box into a nearby trash bin. Behind me, the old man kept lecturing. "You young comrades don't appreciate the hard work of the people. Throwing candy away like that is such a waste. Such good candy. My teeth are still good. If you don't want it, I'll eat it." I walked away quickly, a strange, light feeling in my chest. It was done. The ghost of Mark Thorne had been laid to rest. The past was truly buried. As I walked back into my office building, I realized I was free. Truly, completely free. And my future for the first time felt entirely my own. With the Thorns drama receding into a distant, sordid memory, my life found a new and steady rhythm. My probation period ended, and I was officially made a full-time employee in the logistics department. The raise in pay was modest, but the sense of permanence was profound. I was building a life, brick by brick, with my own two hands. Alex stopped mentoring me directly, trusting me to handle my work independently. He seemed to be increasingly busy, often disappearing into meetings or being called away for days at a time. I learned from office gossip that his family's special status often involved sensitive assignments that weren't discussed. I respected the distance, focusing on my own tasks with a quiet diligence that earned me the respect of Comrade Leong and my other colleagues. The only remnant of my old life that stubbornly refused to fade was Chloe Thorne. Denied access to the compound, she took to waiting outside the gate, always dressed in her best, her eyes scanning for Alex's car or his figure. She had become a local fixture of pity and mild amusement. Her strategy had evolved from confrontation to a pathetic, persistent courtship. She would bring small, cheap gifts, a handkerchief, a packet of tea, which Alex would pointedly ignore or, on one memorable occasion, hand directly to a passing street sweeper. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was immersed in reconciling a complex shipment manifest when Alex strode into the main office from a side entrance. He had been away for a week, and his presence still carried a faint energy of somewhere else, of important things seen and done. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me. "Comrade Patel," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need an urgent favor." I looked up, startled by his tone. "What's the emergency?" He came closer, leaning down slightly. "Pretend to be my girlfriend. Help me get rid of Chloe." A flicker of genuine exasperation crossed his usually impassive face. "She's camped out at the main gate with, I think it's a knitted sweater." I was taken aback for a moment, and then I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. The irony was too perfect. I had once told Mark I liked Alex, using him as a shield. Now he was asking me to return the favor. Since I had no plans to find a man anytime soon, and Alex wasn't the type to go around gossiping, neither of our reputations would suffer much. It seemed a fair trade for all the times he'd inadvertently rescued me. "Since I owe you more than a few favors," I said, standing up and smoothing my trousers, "consider it done." I followed him downstairs and out towards the main gate. Sure enough, Chloe was there, holding a lumpy hand-knitted sweater in a garish shade of yellow. When she saw Alex, her face lit up with a desperate hope. But the moment her eyes landed on me, walking purposefully beside him, her expression curdled into cold jealousy. "Why are you here?" she snapped at me. "I only came to see Comrade One." I slipped my arm through Alex's, feeling the solid muscle of his forearm tense slightly in surprise before he relaxed into the charade. "Then why are you meeting my boyfriend?" I asked, my voice sweetly challenging. Her eyes widened and she let out a disbelieving snort. "What? Since when was he your boyfriend?" "From the very beginning," I answered smoothly, the lie coming easily. "Didn't I say the one I liked was Comrade One? When I broke up with your brother, I made it very clear. Don't pretend you don't know. That was just to trick my brother." she insisted, her voice rising shrilly. How could you possibly like Comrade Alex? I'm the one who likes him. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She believed persistence would eventually wear him down, that her constant public displays of affection would somehow grant her the position she coveted. I smiled, a slow, provocative smile. But what can you do if Comrade One doesn't want your affection? I gave Alex's arm a slight squeeze. He only wants mine. Our feelings aren't the same. I decided to go for the kill, layering on the fiction with a dramatic flair. I buy him watches, bicycles, even suits. Oh, and by the way, I added, lowering my voice conspiratorially but ensuring it carried, even Comrade One's underwear is from me. Do you really think these cheap gifts you bought mean anything to him? Love without commitment is worthless. Neither of us needs that kind of cheap affection. Give that sweater to someone else. Chloe stamped her foot, her face flushing a blotchy red. Maya Patel, don't go too far. This is too far? I shot back, still playing my part with relish. I've already decided to get engaged to Comrade One. When the time comes, I'll send you wedding candy. Oh, Comrade One. Comrade Patel. Congratulations. A voice shouted from a nearby window. One of my colleagues, Comrade Zhang, was leaning out, a broad grin on his face. Congratulations. At last, you two lovers are becoming a pair. So, it was Comrade Patel who made the first move, another voice chimed in from a doorway. I was wondering why our aloof Comrade One was so willing to mentor a trainee. Turns out he was training his own wife. The daughter of the Patel family and the son of the One family. It's a perfect match. Such a talented man and a beautiful woman. Truly well suited. Before I could process what was happening, a small crowd of our colleagues had gathered, having heard everything. The fiction was spiraling out of control and fast. Alex leaned closer, his mouth near my ear. His breath was warm and I could feel the suppressed laughter in his voice. Tao what? He whispered, his tone a mixture of amusement and chagrin. I think they heard the part about my underwear being bought by you. You'll have to take responsibility for me. The corners of his lips twitched, and he finally failed to hold back a quiet, rumbling chuckle. Chloe pointed a trembling finger at us, sputtering, You're bullying me. Then with a strangled cry of humiliation she turned and ran, her footsteps pounding on the pavement. She was so distraught she wasn't watching where she was going and crashed straight into a parked bicycle. She fell hard onto the concrete, the yellow sweater flying from her grasp, and let out a loud, theatrical wail. Amidst the murmurs and laughter of the crowd, I covered my burning face with my hands. The plan had worked too well. I fled back to the office, leaving Alex to deal with the well-wishers, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of victory and profound embarrassment. I hoped that would be the end of it. But the gossip mill once started was impossible to stop. The story of our engagement, complete with the salacious detail about the underwear, spread through the unit like wildfire. 2 days later I received a long-distance phone call. It was my father. Maya. His voice was stern, crackling slightly over the line. The Patel family has always been a family of responsibility. Since you even bought Alex Wen's underwear, this has affected his reputation greatly. He paused and I could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose. For both your sakes, you and Alex should hurry up and get married. Dad, listen to me, I pleaded, my voice tight with panic. That's not, let me explain. No explanations, he cut in, his tone brooking no argument. Phone calls cost money. Don't waste public resources. Let me know after you're married. The line went dead with a definitive click. I stood there holding the buzzing receiver, utterly dumbfounded. How had a simple favor spiraled into a marriage mandate from my own father? I scratched my head in frustration, feeling the walls of my carefully constructed new life closing in. As if on cue, Alex appeared in the doorway of the communications room. He didn't avoid me. Instead he came over and asked, his expression unreadable, Seriously, what do you really think? My shoulders slumped. Honestly, I just wanted to help you. I never thought about marrying you. He chuckled, a low warm sound. I'm not such a bad option. He leaned against the doorframe, ticking points off on his fingers. Aside from being older than you, I'd treat you well. Older men know how to care for their wives. I'm tall, strong, handsome, you wouldn't suffer marrying me. A glint of humor shone in his eyes. Plus, I actually listen to my wife. Don't you want a man who listens? The directness of the question, the sheer absurdity of the situation, and the undeniable truth of his statements. He was all those things, left me flustered. I mean, I do, I admitted cautiously, my face heating again. But just then a woman's voice, cultured and clear, came from behind him. Maya Patel? We both turned. The elegant woman in her 50s stood there, her posture perfect, her eyes, the same shape and intensity as Alex's, taking in the scene. The two of us standing close together in a quiet corridor, my face flushed. I'm Lin Wei, Alex's mother, she said, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. I came here today on business, but I thought I'd invite you to dinner as well. She stepped forward, her gaze flickering between us, noting our proximity. Her smile widened. Oh, you two go on. Go on. Alex quickly straightened, waving his hands in a rare display of fluster. Mom, I'm not busy. I'm not busy at all. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. In all my life, this was only the second time I'd been so utterly embarrassed. What kind of fate was this? You two talk. I'm not in a rush. I just came to handle some business with your director, Mrs. Wen said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. She gave me a final appraising look, then turned and walked off without a backward glance. I instinctively reached out a hand, wanting to stop her to explain, but no words came. Why was it that the more I tried to explain, the deeper I sank with Alex Wen? He took the chance to clasp my retreating hand, his grip firm and warm. He was laughing under his breath now, a genuine open sound I realized I'd rarely heard from him. I think you'd better just give in to me, he said, his thumb stroking the back of my hand in a gesture that was startlingly intimate. Otherwise, with my reputation ruined like this, I won't be able to find anyone else in the future. You have to take responsibility for me. I looked at him, at his handsome, honest face, his tall and strong figure, and most importantly, knowing he had the strength and integrity to protect not just my body but my peace, I couldn't deny that my heart stirred. The fear and resistance I'd been clinging to began to melt away, replaced by a cautious, blooming hope. He wasn't Mark. He was steady. He was kind in his own quiet way. And he was offering me a partnership, not ownership. I wasn't hesitating anymore. If that's the case, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, we can get engaged first. Alex's expression turned serious, but his eyes held a warm light. My mom already checked the calendar for us. He took a small step closer. She said this September is the most auspicious date for marriage. There won't be another one like it for 3 years. He looked directly into my eyes, his gaze earnest. Comrade Patel, I'm requesting that we marry first and fall in love after. My cheeks burned, but it was a pleasant heat, a flush of anticipation rather than shame. I lowered my voice, a shy smile finally breaking through my reserve. Approved. Our wedding was a simple, bureaucratic affair, a sharp contrast to the grandiose fantasy I'd once harbored for my first marriage. We signed the papers at the civil registry with Comrade Liang and a few close colleagues from the office as our witnesses. There was no white dress, no elaborate banquet. My father, unable to get leave from his remote post, called again, his voice thick with emotion, giving us his blessing. It was enough. After the formalities, Alex took me and our small group of witnesses to the best restaurant in town. The food was delicious, the conversation warm and lively. Mrs. Wen, my mother-in-law, was gracious and welcoming, her earlier amusement replaced by a genuine warmth. There was no sign of the thorns, no shadow of my past life. It was a clean, happy start. After the wedding, we were allocated a 2-bedroom apartment in a compound for mid-level cadres and their families. It was modest but clean, with bright windows and a small balcony. It was ours. On weekends we would return to the Wen family home, a larger, comfortable house where Lin Wei would fuss over us with delicious home-cooked meals. The atmosphere was one of quiet respect and easy affection, a world away from the constant tension and emotional manipulation of the Thorne household. I continued to excel at work, my performance gaining recognition from my superiors. Part of it was my own diligence, but a larger part, I knew, was the confidence that comes from feeling secure and valued at home. Naturally, because of my relationship with Alex, our assignments were arranged in different departments to avoid any conflict of interest, but we often crossed paths in the canteen or during unit-wide meetings. We were a team both in name and in the quiet understanding that developed between us. One weekend, as we were walking to the market near his parents' house, I happened to see them. Mark Thorne and Clara. They were standing outside the district office, holding a pile of paperwork, clearly there to finalize their divorce. I overheard Clara sneering, her voice sharp and cruel. Useless. Not even a real man anymore. Mark's shoulders were hunched, his face a mask of weary defeat. He said nothing. I only glanced at them, a fleeting glimpse into a tragedy I had narrowly escaped. Then I tightened my grip on Alex's arm, feeling the solid, reliable strength of him. He followed my gaze, understood, and simply covered my hand with his own, a silent gesture of solidarity. We walked on, their misery fading behind us like a forgotten nightmare. Whether Mark lived or died no longer held any power over me. Later, I heard the sordid details from colleagues who enjoyed a good piece of gossip. Mark and Clara had divorced because she had been caught cheating again, this time with a traveling salesman. The ensuing fight between the Thorne parents and Clara had been vicious, a bitter war over every pot and pan, every yuan, until the household was in utter chaos. After the divorce, Clara, in a final act of spite, had remarried quickly to a widowed shopkeeper and become pregnant. She had gone back to the Thornes' old neighborhood to flaunt her pregnancy, to provoke them with proof of her fertility. The confrontation turned physical. In a fit of rage, Mark's parents had pinned her down and, in a horrifying act of violence, forced an abortion. They were both sent to a labor camp for their crime. Chloe, terrified of being implicated or having to care for her broken brother, cut all ties with the family and ran away, rumor had it, with a salesman from the south. Mark was left utterly alone in that cursed house. A week later, neighbors reported a foul smell. The police broke in and discovered he had been dead for several days, having overdosed on sleeping pills. When I heard the news, my heart was calm. There was no schadenfreude, no sense of victory. They had simply received what they deserved, the natural conclusion of a lifetime of greed, cruelty, and moral bankruptcy. And I had finally gained the life I was always meant to have. I looked at Alex, who was reading a report on the sofa, and then at the small sleeping form of our son, little and curled up in his crib. The evening sun slanted through the window, painting the room in warm gold. Standing there with my husband and my child, I finally understood what peace felt like. I had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and even death in another lifetime. But this time I had chosen differently. I no longer clung to illusions of love from a cold-hearted man or the false warmth of a greedy family. Instead, I had built a life with someone who respected me, a home filled with quiet companionship rather than silent resentment, and a future shaped by my own choices and hard work. The past had already buried itself. Mark, Clara, Chloe, and the entire Thorne family had collapsed under the weight of their own choices. I no longer hated them because hatred belonged to yesterday. What I held now was my son's tiny hand, the strength of Alex's steady presence, and the profound certainty that I had finally, completely reclaimed my destiny. I smiled, tears of gratitude, not grief, stinging my eyes, and whispered to myself, this time I lived for me. The peace I found was not a static thing, but a living, breathing rhythm that settled into the bones of my days. It was in the quiet click of the door as Alex left for work, the soft gurgle of an in his crib, the methodical satisfaction of balancing a ledger at my desk. It was a rhythm built on predictability and mutual respect, a far cry from the chaotic dissonance of my first life. Our marriage, which had begun as a pact to save face, slowly deepened into a genuine partnership. Alex was a man of his word. He listened. He consulted me on decisions from household budgets to the potential of applying for a larger apartment. He was not prone to grand romantic gestures, but his care was in the steady, constant things. He would bring home my favorite pastries on a Friday, remember that I disliked the sound of the radio in the morning, and was the one to rise first when fussed in the night, saying, "You need your sleep." My turn. It was in these small, unremarkable moments that I fell in love with my husband. It was not the dizzying, destructive infatuation I had felt for Mark, but a slow, sturdy affection like a tree putting down deep roots. I found myself looking forward to the sound of his key in the lock, to the way his serious face would soften when he played with our son. My work continued to thrive. With Alex's mentorship officially over, I carved out my own space in the logistics department. I proposed a new inventory tracking system that reduced waste and saved the unit money, earning a formal commendation. The praise was public, but the greater reward was the private, proud look in Alex's eyes across the room during the announcement. He never said, "I told you so," but his quiet satisfaction was a louder accolade than any speech. One evening as I was bathing in, Alex came and leaned against the bathroom doorway watching us. The room was steamy and smelled of baby soap. "Director Lee approached me today," he said casually, though I could hear the underlying importance in his tone. "Oh?" I asked, carefully rinsing suds from Anne's hair. "He's being promoted. He recommended me as his successor." I stopped, my hands stilling in the water. This was a significant step. The role came with greater responsibility, higher security clearance, and would place him on a clear path for the upper echelons of the service. "Alex, that's wonderful. What did you say?" I told him I was honored and would need to discuss it with my wife. He said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Tears pricked my eyes, obscured by the steam. In my past life, Mark would have made such a decision unilaterally, viewing my opinion as irrelevant. Alex's simple act of consultation was a testament to the world I now lived in. "And what does your wife think?" I asked, my voice slightly thick. "My wife," he said, coming to kneel beside the tub, his shoulder brushing mine, "is a brilliant logistician with a sharp mind. I value her opinion. I know the hours will be longer. There will be more travel. It will mean more on your shoulders here." I looked at his earnest face, then at our son who was splashing contentedly. This was the fabric of a real partnership, weighing dreams and duties together. "We can handle it," I said firmly. "You have worked hard for this. You are the most capable man I know. You should take it." He smiled then, a rare, full smile that transformed his entire face. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, a damp, soap-scented kiss. "Then I will tell him yes tomorrow." His promotion was announced a month later. There was a small celebration at his parents' house. Lin Wei beamed, refilling my teacup with a proprietary pride. "I always knew my son had it in him," she said, but then she patted my hand. "And he has a good woman beside him. That makes all the difference." The world outside our bubble continued to turn. The sordid end of the Thorne family became a cautionary tale, a piece of grim neighborhood history that was eventually replaced by newer scandals. I never spoke of them, and Alex, perceptive as always, never asked. They were ghosts that had finally been laid to rest. One rainy afternoon I was walking home from the nursery with an bundled against my chest when I saw a hunched figure shuffling through the market, clutching a thin, plastic bag. It took me a moment to recognize Mrs. Thorne. She looked decades older, her face a roadmap of hardship, her clothes worn and thin. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. There was no recognition in her gaze, only a hollow emptiness, a void where her calculating ambition had once lived. She looked straight through me and moved on, just another anonymous soul weathered by life. A complex pang of something, not pity, not triumph, but a profound sense of distance, echoed in my chest. She was a relic from a different epoch of my existence, a character from a book I had closed long ago. I pulled my son closer, feeling the solid, warm weight of him, and continued on my way home. To my home. My life. That night, after Anne was asleep, I told Alex about the promotion I was being considered for in my own department, a team lead position. He listened intently, then grinned. "They'd be fools not to give it to you." He poured us 2 small cups of tea. "We'll be the busiest, most powerful couple in the compound." I laughed, the sound light and free in our cozy living room. "I don't need power. I just like the work." "I know," he said, his expression softening. "That's why you're so good at it." He raised his cup. "To us, Maya. To our future." I clinked my cup against his. "To us." As I lay in bed that night, listening to the steady rhythm of Alex's breathing beside me, I reflected on the winding, impossible path that had led me here. From the depths of despair and betrayal, I had been given a second chance. I had seized it not with a desire for vengeance, but with a fierce determination for peace. I had built a life not on the ruins of the old one, but on entirely new ground, with a man who saw me as a partner, an equal. The hatred was gone, truly gone. It had been a heavy, poisonous cloak, and I had finally taken it off. What remained was this: a quiet love, a fulfilling purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The girl who had died on that hospital floor was a distant memory. The woman I was now was awake, alive, and finally, completely free. The end.